Hey buddy, it's Peter, and this is the 2025 BMW F900 R. So BMW calls this a roadster. I think most of us would call it in the naked bike class. And what's interesting to me about this bike is more affordable than you might think. Even though it's a BMW, it does compete with bikes that are, I would say, lower quality, lower spec, but we just reviewed, or at least I just reviewed, the 2026 BMW R1300 or G30, the RT, you know what I mean, the 1300 RT, which is just a spaceship with technology. This one still gives you practical technology that most people can understand and figure out right from a few minutes in and go enjoy the bike. So this is less spaceship, but still great technology in a bike that is still pretty affordable for a BMW and still gives you that quality. For a lot of people, this is the entry into BMW that is a true BMW. The 310 lineup that I think is good value and good vehicles are definitely a step below what this bike is. So we're going to talk about this bike in detail. We're going to give it as best we can an overview. And I want to thank Rally Motoplex for giving me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup so that I can do reviews like this for you. I'm trying to review as many 2025 and now 2026 bikes as I possibly can. And if any of that sounds interesting, do me a favor, hit subscribe, leave a like, leave a positive comment. And the best thing you can do to help me continue to grow the channel and get more access to more things and do more things for you is find a couple videos you like and watch them to the end. All right, let's get going with this review. So we already talked about the class of this bike, which is normally what I do in this section of the video, but I do want to point out a couple things that are BMW specific, where some BMW people are going to say, hey, this isn't the true BMW that I want, and that's because these are different than what makes BMWs unique. So first of all, this has a parallel twin engine. It's 105 horsepower, so it's plenty of power. It's definitely competitive with everything out there, certainly for a twin cylinder, but in a 900cc, it definitely gives you the power you need, but it is a parallel twin, not the twin, the boxer twin, which is a lower, wider engine. So this is a more traditional engine. You don't have things like the single shock up here. You got traditional fork in there, which is an upside down fork. And this one is a chain drive, not a shaft drive. Sometimes people say it's a boxer engine with a shaft drive. That's the BMW they're looking for. So I do want to point out that this one does not have that. What that does do is makes it a lighter overall bike. Without the shaft drive, it's less complication and it's lighter, although you do have to oil the chain. And without the boxer engine, that can be a more compact engine, which can also be contributing to sport ability. So sportability, compact is popular. BMW claims that their lower weight is also a popular way to create sportability, but there's lots of options in there. So just a couple things worth pointing out for the BMW aficionado of what you're getting in this bike. All right, let's start at the front wheel. Let's move our way back. So if you've never seen my videos before, you know, if you have seen them, you know I love to start at the front wheel because you can talk about the manufacturer's intent. Now, when we talk about intent, we should talk about these lightweight wheels. These are actually wheels taken from the more expensive bike and put on the less expensive bike. So these are higher end, lightweight wheels that they are more than good enough for what you have in this class, certainly probably top of the class for this type of thing. Obviously, dual disc brakes would be standard. Having the radial mount is sort of standard for this type of price point and this type of class nowadays anyways. You have Brembo brakes. So again, all of the braking is going to be a nice step up from where you probably were before. You do have the stainless steel lines here, so you're going to have, Brembos already have very good feel anyways, but the steel lines, of course, are also going to give you that really, really nice feel. So not only will you have the good feel, good control, but you're also going to have the ability to just come down hard from high speeds over and over again. It's a bike you could take to the track. Overall, nothing fancy here. You got upside down forks here. We're going to talk about them. They are adjustable here. You also have a rear suspension that has some adjustments. You can set that electronically in the rear suspension, but not electronically in the front suspension. So again, some mix and mash of BMW technologies here with sort of standard high-end stuff here, and then we'll talk about some extra stuff. You also have a steering damper on this, so you do have some extra control there, or ability for emergency type controls. So again, what you see here in the tire is a Pirelli Diablo Rosso 4, so this is a stickier tire, stickier street tire. Sometimes on a stickier street tire, you gotta warm it up just a little bit to get a little more traction out of it, but if you do warm it up, you're gonna get a lot of traction out of this bike. So if you don't have the traction, might be a cool day, but once you get this bike warmed up, you're gonna have a lot of traction. So that's gonna make it a pretty sporty bike. So a little earlier we talked about that parallel twin engine with that 105 horsepower, and I want to point out when you see this, there's no air through here. Like you can't see a line right through to the wall, and that's because everything is pushed forward and low. This is standard sport bike stuff. It's different than what BMW sometimes does. BMW with their boxer engines places things a little bit differently, but this is standard type stuff. So again, you're going to be familiar with this if you move from another motorcycle to this motorcycle, but the twin engine making over 100 horsepower is a little bit more rare. A lot of twin engine bikes in the 900, 700, 800 cc, they're going to make under 100 horsepower. This one's making over 100 horsepower. So you do have some advantages in technology, but again, a little more familiar architecture anyways to other brands. Now you do have, like I mentioned, that piggyback shock back here, which does have some electronic control, so you can switch your drive modes from like normal to dynamic, that kind of thing, and it can stiffen that up electronically. The front side, like we talked about, is sort of a standard. And then you do have the dual-sided swing arm. So again, you have a swing arm here and on the other side. Brembo brakes on the rear as well. A lot of lesser brands won't put Brembos on the rear. They'll just put Brembos on the front where you can kind of see them and pay attention to them, but you've got high quality stuff there. So Brembo brakes on the rear. You do have a center stand as well, which is worth pointing out. BMW often puts those on, so you have that here. Again, a little easier for chain maintenance, that kind of thing. All right, let's show you what it's like on this bike, and then we're gonna take a look at the dash. So different motorcycles are going to give you a different feel just from sitting across them. Because this has more standard architecture than some other BMWs, it is going to be a familiar feel for many of you who hop on a standard naked bike. Is the seat a little bit tall? Potentially, but again, the narrowness out here helps limit that. So again, I never look at the seat specs because it can be wider, narrower, it can fit people different ways. I'm about 6 feet tall, I've got a comfortable bend to my legs, flat footed on both sides, and I do feel, again, like a lot of bikes in this general class, that it's not that heavy. Now, you have steel pegs up here, no rubber padding, so that's very similar to a race type bike. You do have a little bit more aggressive feel here, so you can really lean this over in the corner. If you want to really get down, you can absolutely do that. But your riding position, although it has a slight forward lean, is not race bike forward. So you're having quite a sporty bike that is not super race bike sporty. Now again, being a BMW, you want to raise these handlebars up, no problem. You want to put various attachments on, you can do that. One thing I have is a little bit of a complaint just in the showroom, which will probably prove to be nothing out on the road, is the mirrors look physically small. Now I've driven bikes that have mirrors on the handlebars where they look physically small, but because they're so close to your face, they actually give you just fine view. So hard to say in the showroom where I'm at here. I moved away from all the other BMWs, so it's just a plain wall behind me, but it is worth noting that you know, those are things you can fix in the aftermarket, accessories, that kind of thing. We're going to show you the controls here. I do want to tell you the basics here. They do have heated grips, something like that. That's a standard feature on this bike, which is nice to have. Adjustable levers here as well for both clutch and brake lever. And then you have, if you looked at the 1300 review that I just did, it has a big like 10.25 inch screen. This one's a smaller screen, but it has a lot of the same visual look to it. So we're going to show you that right now. So before I turn this bike on, I want to go full disclosure. Rally Motoplex is an awesome dealer. They have hundreds and hundreds of bikes here, and every single one is hooked up to a battery tender, which they can keep charged and keep plugged in. But every now and then I choose a color scheme, which I chose this one, that I think shows up best on video over something like black, and every now and then a battery can be low. I don't want you to take anything negative about the dealer on this. This is not their thing. When they deliver to a customer, it is a fully checked out bike, and I've seen them replace batteries with brand new just to make sure the customer has everything they need. But there's a chance that when I turn this on, it's going to tell us there's a low battery warning. So we're going to go through the dash, not so quickly, but sort of quickly, because this one does have a little bit lower battery than I would like. So why don't we, before we go to the dash, just glance at the top of the suspension tubes here, because you can see very clear, easy to read, preload here, adjustments and that kind of thing. You can read the writing here for your adjustment on your shocks, which is a little different than the typical Japanese brands. They have a little bit harder, those are a little bit harder to read stuff. So you do have the adjustable forks there. It is a keyless entry, so we're going to tap that button in a second to turn on this dash. Let's do that. And again, if a warning comes on, you've been pre-warned. Tapping that on, you can see it come to life there. Very nice, crystal clear dash. Again, they don't always show on camera how clear they are in person. You've got simple things down here like your 23 degrees or 23 degrees Celsius. Now this is already set into various menus because I was playing with this earlier. So why don't we just kind of quickly show you the My Vehicle type stuff as we select in here. we'll go down here. You can give a full picture of everything that's going on. Everything from tire pressure monitors, which this bike doesn't have right now, but you can have that, to various other things. You've got fuel range. You can see the voltage is quite low on that. That's why I was just checking this. But you do have things that you can check in here. So we're going to go back to the main menu in a second here. I'm just going to do a quick cut to get there, and we'll show you the basic dash and some of the other controls really quickly. All right, back to the main menu. Quick thing I want to show you is the red line is super low. It should be past 9,000, right? Well, this thing's not warmed up, not broken in, so that red line will digitally move for you just to give you a sense of what's going on. Over on the top here, you do have a road section. That is your ride mode. It is set to road, dynamic, or rain. There's our low battery warning, which we knew was coming, right? So we're going to clear that for a quick second. There's everything there. We can show you different dashes as well, which are super cool. Maybe we can just show you that right now. Go down here. Let's go to sport. We'll go down there. There we go. So you got a dash here that's pretty cool. There's different types of dashes, can show your braking and that kind of thing. And then you've got other dashes in here which can show you lap timers and that kind of thing. So very cool stuff. We're going to turn it off now and let them take care of this battery, but let's show you the controls on this bike now. So when I talked earlier in this video about the 310s aren't really, or the 310cc bikes are not really, in some people's minds, true BMWs, and then some people would argue that this isn't a true BMW until you get all the things until you're at the very most expensive BMW. But where I said this is sort of the beginning of what I consider to be true BMWs, it really comes down to this. You've got that clear dash, which we showed you. You've got this nice controller here, which is a good way to go through menus. You can cycle through and cycle there. You also got menu controls here. These two can be confusing, so it is worth pointing out on a BMW. Just get used to what is in your dash and what you need to access before you just head out on the road and try to figure it all out while you're driving. Once you know how to get through things, this is actually a very intuitive controller, but you should have a sense of what you can do and how to get there so that you know, okay, scroll down, tap over, do that kind of thing, or you can use the menu buttons up and down. It can be confusing once you figure it out. It's not. This is the suspension, the rear suspension button, so you can switch that for various drive modes, or you can switch that for suspension mode, so you could put it into a road mode and still have a dynamic suspension setting, which is kind of a cool thing to have. You do have your hazard warning lights up here. Cruise control is also a nice feature to have on a bike like this. Not everything in this class has that. And of course the signals in the horn. I think the signals might be self-canceling. On other BMWs they are. I haven't checked this particular one. You guys can let me know in the comments if I am correct that these are also self-canceling. All right, I do want to show you the other side really quickly, so let's, you know what, let's do it in the same shot. Let's come straight across. Sorry for blasting your eyes with it, a quick movement there. I'm going to zoom in a little further there. Hard to see what's on top here, but easy to reach. That is your heated grips right there. Drive modes right here, so you can cycle through those 3 drive modes right there, and then your start-stop switch, which is your kill switch, in addition to the ignition, which is, as we come back across here, the ignition is just a push button because it is a keyless entry key on this bike. So let's talk about who this bike is for. Now you've heard me say a number of times that this is kind of class similar, right? A class similar parallel twin. It's, you know, kind of looks similar. And I think for a lot of people, they kind of maybe look over this bike because the BMW aficionados are saying shaft drive, all these options, all these kinds of things. And then you also have people that are looking at this style of bike. They go, oh, BMW is pretty expensive, so I'll stick with the whatever other brand they want to go with. And that's where this is a bit of an interesting bike. I think there's good value here. I think BMW has priced this bike really, really well, and you do have a feeling that doesn't show up in a walk-around review of a class bike that is a step above in many ways. Now, like I said, you've got things, just the basic specs. You got the quick shifter, you got the cruise control. Those are nice things to have that you don't always get in this class of bike. You've got that extra horsepower. You've got a sort of a unique way of doing things to have the ability to keep it in a road mode, not a dynamic throttle mode, but put a dynamic ride in here, or to go to the dynamic ride and switch your ride, the ride feel electrically or electronically, the rear suspension, to be able to adjust the front suspension. You've got a lot of components here that for any brand would be good for the price. BMW's control system, while confusing, is also simple. And what I mean is there's a lot of menus in there, so you have to kind of get in your head what you've got available to you, but actually switching through them with this scroll wheel type system is a pretty good way to get through things, and it does give you that BMW experience that you don't get everywhere else. I love things like the red line that drops and raises and that kind of thing. Now, other bikes have that as well. It's not exclusive to BMW, but the overall feel of this bike is of a higher end bike, and I do think that it is a fair price. Now, one thing to remember with a lot of BMWs, very few people buy a BMW and just leave the showroom as is. The big thing with BMW is you can customize this bike the way you want. Any BMW, now I won't say specifically to do with this one, but like some of their GS models, they have road wheels, you can get optional off-road wheels. They have touring screens, they have smaller wood screens, they have risers in the bars, they have different seats. There's all kinds of ways to customize these bikes to truly make it yours, whether it's more for comfort or more for sport or whatever you want it to be. This bike is no different. You can really make it your own bike in the way that you want, right from the BMW catalog, rather than having to go to aftermarket afterwards. And you can finance some of those pieces along with the bike, and you have a good warranty with this bike as well. So all of those things play in to sort of put it a step above at a very fair price. And I think this bike is going to appeal to anybody looking in the category who wants something that maybe is a little bit more unique, maybe is a little bit more special in certain particular ways, like the technology, like, you know, things like the rear electronic suspension, stuff like that. There's a few little details that I think to some people will be enough of a difference to make this bike stand out within the class, especially when you consider that it's priced competitively with the more mainstream brands. So that's who I see is going to take the bike like this on. If you own the bike, let me know why you love it, why you chose it, and more like that. If you want to see more of the dashes, especially in these BMWs, I'm thinking I may have to do a BMW Dash Day where I go through this style dash and a more advanced dashes. So if that's something you want to see, let me know and we'll look into doing that as well. So thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.